Hi, good evening. Thank you very much for having me here. And it kind of, I really understand what it feels like to be the minority, you know. So I have no background in PR, and really, one thing I want to talk about is why 5 or 6 shifts that are happening are going to actually reshape your careers, whether you like it or not. And those this is an interesting thing. When I started to write Digital Tsunami, I discovered that there was an interesting coincidence, which is that the 4 major tsunamis that have happened in the world, have all coincided with major shifts in the way that we have worked. So, the first one was in 1784, and, this was the time when in 1784, you had the first industrial revolution. And 1782, you actually had the first largest recorded tsunami. That was the first one. About 100 years later, to coincide with the second industrial revolution, 1870, you actually had the second one. The third one is where, the mobile revolution really took off, which was 2004. And 2011, we actually saw the beginnings of what we are today looking at, the fourth industrial revolution. So if you sort of look at the social, mobile, analytics, the revolution, cloud, all of that actually started to lay the foundation for what we now see. The impact of all the digital technologies that we see, whether from chatbots to artificial intelligence and machine learning, which is a subset of that artificial intelligence. And actually the way all these networks are coming together, whether it's Internet of Things or whether it's 3D printing, all of it is going to come together and start impacting individual careers and lives, which is really what I want to talk to you about. So the first piece to think about is, when you talk about digital, I mean, one of the simple ways to understand digital, when I started to look at it, was what really happens when something goes digital, What is that, the opportunity to access something? I mean, think about the fact that when we move from physical film to digital, I mean, it changes behavior automatically. I mean, so one is that you start experimenting. So the word is going to experiment a lot more. Nothing, because, it costs nothing. The opportunity to actually look at something, earlier, when I had to take somebody had to take a photograph, you sort of stand still and then you take, because there are only 36, shots in the film, you really had to ration it out. And I remember my dad used to say that, why do you need 2 reels when you're going on vacation, because, it's like 72 photographs. Today, when the baby wiggles the finger, you take 72 shots because you sort of post half of them online. So the other behavior that happens is people really start communicating. Why this is important is because in some shape or form, this is really going to shape the way careers are going to move. So one of the things which is impacting careers, is going to be about longevity. And the other thing that is going to impact careers is going to be about technology. So you sort of see broadly, if I were to put together the canvas, a couple of things are very important. One is that human beings are going to start living much longer. We actually just had a fabulous set of statistics from the previous panel. All % of the millennials are going to live to be about 100. The kids who have been born in the developed countries in the last 5 years are going to live to be closer to about 107. In most cases, 104. Now, even if you assume that, our kids are going to be sort of living to closer to 100, maybe 90, 95, just pause for a minute and ask yourself, what does that really mean? When I went to college, the fashionable thing that most people would say is that, I'm going to work and I'm going to retire by the age of 30 because I would have made my millions and then I would have retired. Okay, assuming that comes true. So the question is, what do you really do to, stay connected, stay curious, stay engaged from the age of, let's say, 30 when you make your million to the age of 90, which is actually 6 decades. So one of the challenges that we haven't really had a great answer to figuring out is the whole notion of boredom is going to actually start destroying careers much faster than what we have imagined. And the notion of boredom actually comes in because a lot of things which when distributed over a span of time, which is how, in the previous generation to the workforce, when they started really looking at getting the different stages of your career, you get promoted, you buy assets, you do all of that. People bought a house and a car somewhere towards the end of their career. And today, as soon as people start working, you actually bought your two largest assets. You sort of, bought your house, you bought a car. And, most people hit a certain level of their career in terms of designations, within about 7 or 10 years of working. And the question is, if you extend, therefore, that lifespan, which are you going to spend working, what are you going to do to stay engaged and get a feeling of progress? Most of the times, your designation to do shift really has nothing much to do with anything else other than that you are making progress in some shape or form. So if you sort of take that element away, what is it that is going to trigger your curiosity, give you a marker that, okay, it's really like, imagine if you're running around and there is no defined end of the circle when you're going around in a racetrack or something, you know that you can complete one round, you're on the second and the third. Imagine if it's just a, infinite road. What it does is actually generates a certain amount of boredom. Because take a parallel example. When you walk, what actually happens is the amount of stimulation that your brain gets with the scenery chat as you go past, is sort of do that, stuff changes on your right and your left. In your peripheral vision, it actually provides a continuous stream of stimulus. If you drive in a car, actually what is going to happen is that, that stream of stimulus moves so rapidly, and it sort of causes a rush, which is why when people who enjoy driving actually get that rush from that element of stimulation that comes in. Transfer this concept onto your career. And you are walking past, imagine you are driving past or potentially walking past endless streams of identical fields on either side. You get bored. Human beings sleep off at the wheel. And that's exactly what is going to happen to a number of careers. But for the fact that you introduce another element that, if people are going to actually live that long, if you sort of look at data from 1947 to if you look at the data now, longevity in India has gone up substantially. It used to be some 38 years, and it's now closer to about 68 or 70. However, what is quite interesting is if you extend it by another 20 years, what is definitively going to happen is that technology is another problem, which is technology is actually making the places of employment, their lifespan is shrinking. So you differs two different things, that human beings are living much longer, and organizations are actually their lifespan down a lot. And if you look at the Standard & Poor Index, most companies used to, in the 30s, used to be around for about 7 decades. Today, the number is closer to 15. If you look at what's happening, therefore, as a result of that, it's going to require a new form of behavior which we are not used to. So, traditionally, we have worked with a 3-stage career. So you talk about, learn, earn, and retire. Yeah, so you sort of get your degree in something, you start earning, and you sort of go through that, and then you retire. And pretty much the norm was whatever you did, by and large, for the most part of your career, if you're not super ambitious, that one degree gave you a push which sort of let you sustain the entire momentum and carried you through your career. What is really now beginning to happen is that shelf life of a degree or any kind of learning is really down to about 3 years. So how do we know this number is 3 years? Let's take a simple example, which is that Apple 3 years back actually released a programming language called Swift. And then they said that, if you want to put your apps onto the iStore, then in which case you would have to code it in Swift. So, and when you sort of look at the instructions, it's quite interesting. It's just a one-pager with very little stuff given. The belief is you will learn the stuff, you will figure it out, and you will start using it. Yeah? This is very symptomatic of where life is going to be. So what actually has now happened is, this year, a couple of months back, they've actually made that available in schools and colleges. So in 3 years, from being a completely niche skill, it has moved to the category called marketable skills. So I want you to, for a minute, visualize all the skills that you have, everything that you have, in the form of a pyramid, yeah? And you sort of look at the base of the pyramid, you would talk about what are called commodity skills, which means you have the skills, but really people don't care about that. And you have the skills and nobody's going to use anything because you have the skills. For instance, a couple of years back, somebody who knew Word, Excel, and PowerPoint actually listed this on their resume. I'm sure you remember those days, yeah? Today, it's understood. I mean, you know, you'd be surprised if somebody said, oh, by the way, I know Word. Okay, all right, what do I do about it? You know, or I know PowerPoint, of course. So a skill which does not get you any whisper of acknowledgement in the job market is a commodity skill, yeah? And in the middle rung, so that's at the bottom of the pyramid. And then in the middle rung, you have what are called marketable skills. So how do we know what is marketable skill? Anything for which there is a structured learning possible is a marketable skill. Therefore, Apple, when it turns Swift into a language which can be taught in a school, in a structured way, school or college, I mean, they're actually making it free, is actually taking it to, you know, from a niche, which it was at the top 3 years back, it's moved to the marketable skill. This is a huge pointer because in another 2 or 3 years, a coder will not get employed if he says, you know, I know how to code in Swift. So the degree to which, and therefore, you know, when you look at this whole model, when I said learn, earn, and retire, you know, that learn part has actually stopped being episodic, which means that, you know, there is no beginning and there is no end. And this is an interesting dimension because pretty much the changes that digital makes is that it blurs boundaries. And therefore, when you blur the boundaries, which a lot of things which were discrete pieces, you know, stuff that you began today and ended tomorrow, it does not remain discrete anymore. It becomes a continuous process. So therefore, learning is one such thing. So what's the problem with that? If I were to just ask you, you know, if you can were to play a little game, and we can do that right now if you wish. If you have a piece of paper in front of you, you know, just pull out. I'm going to ask you to draw, doodle. You know, I'm going to give you a word, and this is only for your reference, so it's not a test of drawing or anything of that sort. We just want you to sort of picture in the simplest possible way. You know, so let's say if I say dog, you can do one of the stick figures, and you know, if you a rectangle with 4 legs, as long as you recognize that's a dog, that's fine. That's good enough. You sort of do that. There's only one other catch, which is that I will ask you to mentally count the alphabet backwards. You know, so so you would say Z, Y, X, W, etc., etc. You sort of do it, and if you reach A, just start again. So we'll do this rapid fire, which means I'll give you the word and you'll draw it out. Is that ready? Doable? Okay. So let's start. We'll start with the count in your head, and I'll call out the word. Okay, all set? Okay, so the first word that you draw is house. Keep alphabet going backwards, yeah, the alphabet counting. You do that. The second word that you draw is dog. The third word that you draw is sun. The fourth word that you draw is a flower. The fifth word that you draw is a book. The sixth word that you draw is learning. The seventh word that you draw, okay, let's stop. What did you draw for learning? What did you drew? Yeah, okay, so you sort of do that. What else did you draw? the book, okay, if you could have drawn, somebody standing in front of a lecture hall like this, and etc. Interesting. A pen, yeah, okay. A laptop, yeah. It's interesting. If you look at the, so this is where the challenge in careers is going to come in. Very rarely do you find somebody who draws anything, let's say, like social media or blogs or symbols for that and things like that. And they may be, so 1%, 2% people would have done that. But the majority of the people don't. And this is the challenge, because in our mind, the notion of learning is not self-driven. Yeah? The notion of learning is something that somebody else actually pushes us to do, and we resist it, and until it becomes inevitable, we sort of do that. And this is the shift that is going to have to be done. Because if you remember, if you connect the dots now, we've said that technology is going to make a job which was, the skills which were niche, move them to the marketable category, and in no time, it's going to become commoditized. And which actually explains why the number of companies today in the IT, ITS industry, in pharma, various places, we always keep hearing so-and-so company, so-and-so company laid off so many people, so many jobs lost, etc. If you sort of look at IT, ITS, 56,000 people have already gone. This is, of course, not, these are the large layoffs. There are tons and tons of these little bits and pieces which don't make the news because, 10 guys gone from somewhere, 5 guys gone, 1 department shut down. And so we are not looking at that. If you sort of add all of it together, it's actually a very frightening scenario where people suddenly one fine day discover that, their jobs are gone. I was in a panel yesterday at the SHRM conference, and the panel, we were about to start, and one of our panelists actually, got a call. He says that, look, before we begin, can I just please take this call? He requested the panel, and he came back, and he was like visibly shaken up. And so I said, who was the call with? He said, it's my boss. And he said this. So I said, okay, your boss has gone, good for you, you've got the new job. So at the end of this, I really regretted having made that asinine statement, because actually it was he who had lost the job. His boss said on the phone, your job is gone, come over and collect your dues. So he's got to go to Singapore, which is where he's working. Yes, he's gone. So the whole notion of where this is going to hit is actually going to start hitting people at a time when they are least prepared for it. That's what actually makes it really frightening. That you are not going to be able to make sense of how do you keep skilling yourself on a sustained basis, because jobs are getting dealing from work, work is getting dealing from skills, and skills are getting dealing from organizations. You sort of look at that, all of it when it is in one particular package is actually very easy to manage. Because in the organizational setting, you are getting skilled, to do whatever work you're supposed to be doing, and that ensures your job safety, yeah? If you de-link each one of these, and you are now in the middle of what is called an open talent economy, which fundamentally means, and just this year alone, I have actually had the opportunity to talk to 5 pretty large employers, let's just leave it at that, who are all talking about how do we shift our hiring strategy to, the open talent economy. So what does that really mean? When you look at open talent economy, it simply means that I can engage you on tap for a job which could be lasting anywhere from, 2 hours to something which could be, 2 months or whatever is that duration. So it's a temporary piece. What is driving that piece is because it's becoming unpredictable. It is becoming harder and harder for businesses to predict the ebb and flow of the customer demand. So it's hard. If you are finding it hard, so if I look at companies where I've spent the last decade or so, if I look at any of these companies, most companies land up having 15,000, 20,000, 30,000 people on the bench, which a polite term means they are paid a notional salary and then actually they are not employed anywhere. And very often there are people, so you see the warning signals that we go to a campus, we make job offers, ask them to join 18 months later. So what does this guy do in between these 18 months? Nothing. So you are already moving from, 18, 50 months out of those 3 years, 50% of your productive time is gone. How do you manage your career and things like this? Therefore, what is going to become important is the speed with which you are able to pick up the skills on your own, being able to understand different aspects, build them into your own portfolio of skills. And there's going to be no guarantee because, when you look at their life, how coders look at their life, the guy says that I'm learning, a language like AngularJS, for example. I have no clue whether this is going to be the most important thing that's going to happen or it's going to be one of the stupid decisions I made. I might have spent a couple of years trying to learn AngularJS and the whole world programming moves towards another language called Ruby on Rails. If you do that, okay, so I started learning this as useless. I've invested time and energy. It gets me nothing. And then I moved to learn something else, which already a lot of people are ahead of the curve. How do I catch up? How do I learn faster? And imagine that from a time when, let's say earlier people, started their career at 25 on average, and then, formally retired from the employment of an organization at age 65 or, 55, and varies to companies and sectors. But, so 30-year careers. Suddenly you double the number of years that you're going to be required to work. You have no choice to do that because your funds, if your employment finishes at 55 or 58, for most places, how do you make your retirement funds last for the next couple of decades? So you have no choice but to stay employed and at least continue to do some kind of work which is possible. So we said, if I were to just do a quick recap, what did we talk about? We said that all jobs are going to be shaped by technology and longevity. Technology, because it's going to reshape everything. So when I was looking at writing the digital tsunami, I found that, so I was looking for sectors where the tsunami would not happen. Yeah? And it was quite fascinating. I started looking at things like agriculture, manufacturing, fashion. And I said, okay, these are not going to be places where technology can do anything. And I was so wrong. Because fashion, the way in which you manage inventory today is really no longer done by human beings because there are machines which do it. It's all getting automated. It's all look at journalism. Things which you kind of believe that it's a creative profession and you sort of do that. Most of the financial analysis that gets written today is, when industries release their quarterly earnings and all of them are written actually by bots. So really anything which involves going through mountains and mountains of data, getting 2 or 3 insights and doing the stuff together in not some great language, but at least can create the first draft for you, that kind of stuff is all getting automated. And every profession, so we keep that pyramid in mind, the chunk which actually makes up a lot of our skills, that all keeps getting eliminated, the commodity skills. What is actually dangerous is that from time to time, your marketable skills are also going to get sliced away. Yeah? And which is what actually leads to organizations making people redundant, etc. And what was once a niche skill moves down and becomes marketable. If you look at every profession, so if you look at John Deere, a company like that, they are now investing in getting sensors fitted in the tractors, which enables people to get prediction about the weather condition structure, soil structure, and actually do farming, not stop visualizing the field as one large patch, but imagine it as multiple squares, like tiles on the floor, and you can actually change the fertilizer content, the moisture, and all of that by square. So it brings down the cost of growing this stuff, and it also actually makes your tractor into a machine, which is the last bit of the shift in the workplace, which is that the line between human beings and machines is going to blur. So, more often than not, when we think of robots in the workplace, we tend to think of them in human form because that's how science fiction has taught us robots are going to be there. So we see lots of these examples of Foxconn and different companies which are doing that. So a company like Foxconn has invested in so many robots that they are actually going to knock off very, very large part of the workforce in the next 3 years. You will see literally millions of people getting replaced by robots. Yeah. So now that's one kind of replacement. Actually, what happens in the case of technology is that it goes through 6 different stages. The first is that you digitize something. So, imagine that you put your health records, onto your phone. The moment you do that, it becomes easy for you to share. It becomes easy for you to modify, access it anywhere. It's stored on the cloud. So all of that, pretty much the way that you do your mail today. Yeah. So digital. So that's your step 1. Your step 2 actually is disruption, because the moment you digitize something, it makes it possible for people to find many different use cases. Yeah? If you look at face recognition, which is one of the things that Apple is now making available a dime a dozen, it's going to happen on every 10. What is really going to land up happening is that your face is going to become the default setting for getting access, for making payments. Already you know that KFC has, in China, they have allowed you to pay with what is called a smile pay. So you go there in front of the kiosk, smile, and it's sort of your face is linked to your bank account, and it sort of makes that seamless transaction. It sounds terrific, and that's the whole problem of technology, that the moment you put a consumer face to it, it starts to look cute. The reality of life is it's going to become it's going to change the notion of privacy forever. Because if I ask you to put your thumb impression and sign something, or I ask you to sign, or you put your thumb, I have to ask you to physically accept to do that. In face recognition, I don't need your permission. Your face has been photographed as you came in. Your face is being photographed as you go into a mall. Your face is being photographed at the airport. If you've done international travel, it's in the FBI database. I mean, I could go on and on. You go into half the shops, you are already on their database. All these databases, once you start merging, already, China has a database of 700 million citizens' photographs. And they're already way ahead of this. Because if you decide that I really don't care about your privacy, I just need this data, and you start looking at that, because it becomes the basis of doing business, it has frightening consequences. What happens when your employer starts using it? And they're not going to ask your permission, in as much as today you have accepted that I'm going to sign away a lot of things my employer can have access to about me, but I don't. For example, your performance record, really what somebody has written exactly. You get to know your ratings and you do all that stuff. But you really have no idea if somebody has put a really terrible recommendation about you and your potential assessments which are done. You have no clue what that says about you. And therefore, you have no warning. Where there is data, it's an unequal distribution. Your employer has information about you which they can use to make a decision about you, but you don't really care. And most people really don't really care about it. But at a point of time when continued employment of any kind is going to depend on multiple data points, it is really going to matter a lot. Already, there's a company called HireView, which Unilever is using to use algorithms to select candidates. So you go through a small interview, there are 30,000 spots on your face, and they read micro expressions. So somebody says that, here is an idea that I have. And in your mind, you kind of thought that, okay, that's pretty asinine. The moment you do that, a human eye actually does not recognize that micro expression, but the computer does, because it sort of blows that up, and you sort of say, oh, wow, this guy is like really got it. And imagine that you get knocked off from that interview, and they just said, oh, you didn't match the skills, or you were overqualified, which is always a nice way to tell someone that we don't want you, because the guy goes back feeling really nice about it. I'm overqualified for the job. It's not. So if you think about the way work is going to happen, it is not going to look anything like what it has looked like, for the last several decades. And therefore, when think about it, 5 years back, 7 years back, did you ever think that there would be a job like data scientist or robot ethicist? These are actual jobs which people do, drone engineer. If you just go onto the Amazon job site, I mean, there are hundreds of jobs for drone engineers. Go to DJI. Look at what people are doing in each of these emerging technologies, 3D printing, it's going to change industries. It's not just going to change firms. So, if you say that the firm's longevity is like 15 years and it's expected to fall to about 11, the problem is going to be that industries are going to disappear. If you look at driverless cars, I mean, just as an example, we kind of tend to understand what is a straight correlation. So you say, okay, driverless cars means drivers will not be needed. Okay, and some people say, okay, that's a good thing because now I can read the news when I'm driving to work. Here is the interesting thing. If you have no accidents, what happens to the auto insurance industry? What happens to people who are studying to be trauma specialists in the medical school? You don't need them. What happens to radiologists? In any case, they are essentially going to be out of jobs because machines read pictures much more accurately than humans do. And you sort of look at any of these professions, you start looking, what happens to the motels that depend on people stopping by on the highway to eat? They are going to disappear because business is going to make it unviable for them. Start looking at, people who build buildings where these trauma centers are there. Hospital profitability is going to change. So, I could probably spend the next half an hour explaining just that one technology of driverless cars is going to change many, many jobs. Now, it's not all doom and gloom, but the point is that jobs are going to start getting created. I just mentioned a little while back that you're going to start seeing new categories of jobs, whether it's drone engineers or whether it's data scientists, we all know it's old hat, robot ethicists, people who train the voice control technology, people who are flagging stuff for the internet users, so the fact that you don't get to see all the, videos of beheadings and molestation and all of that on Facebook is because there are people who actually sit there and screen that stuff. Those are new jobs, content moderators, that's a polite term which is used for that. But these kind of jobs will come up. They are going to require a different set of skills. It's going to require a different mental makeup. And it's going to require people to start thinking of their lives not in terms of a skill, a career, one particular employer, but potentially the model is going to be not job hopping, but career hopping, which actually means that, when you think about, say, someone like me, I worked in many different companies, so whether I worked at Wipro or at Microsoft or Colgate, where I worked, all these places, I pretty much did, as a talent management specialist, the work that I did was in that, leadership development, some people called it this. But I changed employers. I didn't really change my career, in the true sense. But given the fact that careers, options, jobs, they are all going to go through this rapid phase of redundancy, what it means is people have to really start building their own networks where they will start getting employed. Somebody's going to have to employ you to pick up skills which are, on their own. And already I see that as a trend. I mean, there are a number of people who I meet at conferences. A lot of them are actually paying for their own skill building. So I did a talk with leadership strategy, about a couple of weeks back. And I meet this guy, and he was like all of 25, and I said, it's quite nice to see you in a place like this. Which company do you work for? So he mentions the company. So I said, wow, I mean, your company actually sent you for something like this because everybody else in the room was like, vice president, senior vice president, etc. So he says, no, if I have to depend on my employer, I'm going to have to be senior vice president before I get nominated for a program like this. So I'm spending my own money and coming in for a program. So I said, what on earth are you going to do with this stuff? Because, pretty unlikely that your job is going to give you this opportunity. He says, no, I mean, I could work for a smaller startup, and my friends and I, we are contemplating doing a startup where I'll have to have a general management exposure. So he says that what I'm doing is I'm taking, so it's pretty much a simple way to put it is he's creating his own version of business education, yeah? And I'm not going to use the word MBA because I think that's an obsolete degree. But what the guy is really doing is really building business education in this entire process. So the notion, this is an exception today, yeah? But it's a growing trend because people have periodically disengaged themselves from whatever track that they were working in, create the employability for a completely different profession, maybe a different sector, very different set of skills, a very different network. So while on one hand, a lot of stuff which humans do today, especially the cognitive stuff, is going to get automated. Machines are going to, because, simple way to look at it is the citiest, altiest, sportiest jobs, the Olympic motto, faster, higher, faster, stronger. Those kind of jobs are all machines, done by machines, because, they do it faster, they can sort of, lift something much higher than a human being can, they can pick up more weight. So all those things which require either brain or brawn in an expanded capacity is going to be done by machines. But what is going to be done by human beings? So all the things which are unstructured problem solving, where you're looking at dealing with that, which means the moment you are able to put your work or whatever you're doing in the form of a if-then formula. So I said that, we tend to look at robots. When we say that robots are taking our jobs, inevitably every newspaper fits the same, silly kind of illustration. And I've also done that, that kind of stuff, which when you do, you are really looking at, that's a misleading picture, because the stuff which is going to take human jobs is not going to look like that. It's actually going to be looking more and more like, the macros that you write on Excel, the little algorithms which are there, those are the ones which are going to take jobs. And they don't look anything like this. That's possibly going to happen in manufacturing, but not in the white-collar jobs. In the white-collar jobs, it's all going to be the macros. So if you sort of look at that, how do we prepare? How do we a world where this redundancy is inevitable? Employability is potentially a thing of the past, and you are going to possibly work for multiple employers on the same day. What does that mean? So, you sort of look at what a number of kids do today, and I see it a lot more for people who are in their 20s, who would sort of say that, I trained to be a lawyer, and now I'm, running my own coffee shop, and then, I'm learning music. So, completely discrete skill sets. Build those, looking at it, as you build those and layer it with interaction skills, how do you understand human beings? Empathy, design, the ability to listen, the ability to do, understand what is intangible. Those are going to be the jobs which are going to be the high-grade jobs, so understanding psychology, whether of the consumer, employees, is going to become very important. So, the employee, if you manage teams, you're secure because somebody in your team, and this is what human beings are known for. You explain something to them, you say, have you understood? He says, yes, I have. So you will do it tomorrow? He says, yes. And next day, he doesn't do it. Those things will need human beings. Because the machine doesn't understand that when somebody said yes, why is this person not doing it? So in effect, I think the key message, if I were to just really summarize, if you sort of look at what, the ability to individualize something is going to be a skill. So what is the difference between personalization and individualization? Personalization ends, where I hand over the product or the service to you. But individualized is when I can add my own point of view. It could be a design, I add that on my own and sort of do that. That's individualized. Which means on this, if I painted a flower, that would be individualized. Right now, it's personalized. Somebody stitched it for me. So that's, if you look at an open talent economy, being able to work with people outside of the organization, it's no longer going to be people limited to inside the organization, because inside the organization, that base is going to shrink dramatically. And most of us are going to, have to prepare to be free agents of some sort. So when we talk about the gig economy, how do you prepare for the gig economy? Inside your organization, start working on projects with different teams. Because collaboration is going to become a very, very important piece. Collaboration doesn't mean that, two people work together, they are friends, they go for a beer in the evening. That's not collaboration. But collaboration is the ability to actually co-create stuff with resources which are not inside the organization necessarily. So it's going to become, ecosystem. Manage ecosystems. Learning to manage network. I mean, your consumers, your network of consumers owns your brand. They don't, your brand is not owned by the people who are paying you for it. Because one tweet from somebody can destroy an existing brand. One bad review on Glassdoor can do far more damage than anything else. And I think the organization to learn to work with a very different set of norms, because the digital economy is like a real watershed, and therefore the tsunami. Because a lot of old things, security, industries, all of that is going to disappear. But in that, a set of possibilities is going to come up. And the people who are going to keep experimenting are the ones who are going to be the winners in this game. Thank you.